Um, Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me in beautiful North Carolina. The weather is way nicer than in New Haven, so thanks for taking me away. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you for the invitation. I was fascinated by this concept and started Googling more about upcoming work. I'm fascinated by learning about how we can interpret and blend narratives of human culture with the natural world, because as Claire said, these are not necessarily separately, and they have been an intricate part of us, and they will continue to be. I mean, we as humans, we're also sort of like a superorganism, right? There's hundreds of thousands of species inside of us, and somehow I'm making this talk even though there's a million microbiomes in my stomach not telling me what to do. I'm gonna try to make this a combination of some of my science, but also some of the things that keep me up at night, both as in my own humanity, as myself, but also in how we can make a positive change in the future, because we often have a lot of information and we often know what are the bigger levers that we can do for societal change to avert collapse of biodiversity. And it's often the soft science, it's often the passion, the feelings, rather than the hard facts, right? We know that we need to decarbonize our economy, yalla yalla, but it's really hard to make this positive change, and that's where the humanity, that's where social science, activism, art, and music step in. But, well, who on earth am I? I'm the tiny one here on the right, and the left one is my older brother, so I guess I've always been meant to be a biologist. But that's half of the story. That's also my brother and me. I was a pretty lousy musician, but I know how to play my cards. This was in Montevideo Airport. We would play music for tourists to arrive, ask them for money, and then we bought Timon and Pumbaa hats. So I was always, I guess, an entrepreneur in some ways. And if I tell you my CV, you would think it's a straight line, but that's totally not true. I grew up in different countries. I went to school in Uruguay, in Costa Rica, and in Germany. Then I did my education. I started actually journalism in Costa Rica. I had no idea that you can study biology to be a scientist. I thought you study biology to become a tour guide. So I studied journalism. And honestly, my breaking point was when they taught me about soccer journalism. And while I love soccer, I don't want to dedicate my life to it. So I took a leap of faith and applied to one school in Germany that had no grading requirements. They took me, hated it, because it was all about physics and math, and I'm really not good at physics and math, and everyone here should know you do not need to be good at physics and math to be a data scientist or an empirical researcher. NASA didn't think so, at least, so I hope you don't judge me for my lack of math. I went to live in the Galapagos Islands for 2 years because I was frustrated with the German education system. The German education system is the complete opposite of what the liberal arts school concept is in the United States. So I was actually not aware that I can use my science for social change. I was also always doing that on the side through my own personal stage. And it's only recently that, given the times that we find ourselves in that are really, really challenging, actually, beyond on a personal level, interpersonal level, politics, that we need to combine these things, and that's totally okay. And well, I went to the United States now. I'm almost done with my PhD and looking forward to trying to build a somewhat alternative academic career where I can wave into some of these musical aspects. And if you connect these dots together, it's anything but a straight line, right? Just like mapping these countries on a map is very different. But what drove me to study biology, and probably many of you care about for a sustainable future, is the biodiversity crisis, right? 1 out of 6 species is going to be extinct at the end of the century if we don't change the way that we're doing things. So that is our motivation. And luckily, we have a lot of information available how to do this. There's over 1,000 satellites right now that are taking pictures of Earth 24/7 just for environmental purposes. So this is, for example, Mother Earth breathing in 1 year in terms of greenness. But I study animals. But if trees are our world lungs, well, then animals are the veins that connect ecosystems. So these are actually little animals equipped with GPS backpacks, and we can see their voyages across the world in real time. And if we put them all together, for example, you can see that birds are going to migrate to northern hemisphere as snow melts, and as snow comes back, you're going to see the world basically migrating back south. So I literally think these are the veins pulsating ecosystems. Absolutely gorgeous, right? But look at all this data. It all started in Europe and North America, but the whole world should be pink, right? There's animals everywhere. So this will also be a story about how, as scientists, we should be a little bit more aware of where we study these things, because nowadays we live in a world where biodiversity is going to become a tradable commodity, such as carbon offsets. And governments have just paid $200 billion for this. And for that, we need data. And where we have data decides where we build models, which then decides where we decide conservation actions, and most importantly, investments. So this is a story of like data, but also the consequences of this. So we are just at a critical turning point in biodiversity. 195 nations. I think every country on Earth except the United States and Syria have actually pledged to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is an incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to basically double the amount of protected area that we have in the planet. And for that, we need information of where are wild things, where are plants. And this is just a plot of 4 billion observations of the natural world of 1 million species. And if I would think, well, we actually have a lot of information in the United States. We should know everything. But actually, if we start zooming in, we can not just see the typical global north, global south divide, but if we zoom into cities in the United States, we will see how systemic racism and inequality have also shaped even where we have information on birds. And I'm not the first person to say this. I think in the last 20 years, at least my field of ecology is experiencing a sort of like deep-ward, uncomfortable look into our past, into colonial history, how it literally shapes the distribution of plants. A lot of these plants are basically brought from Europeans. Why on earth are there more bird species named after Europeans in Peru than all of Europe together? And as I was saying, we live in like really, really pressing times where I think that like of my science as, sure, while I work with satellites that take pictures, my science is everything but objective, right? I cite who I've read, who I learned. In Germany, they tell me who invented ecology. In the United States, they told me something different. In Costa Rica, they're going to tell me something different. So my science is not 100% subjective as much as I would like to. I cite who I want. I frame my study to get it in the journal that I try to get at. I have 5,000 words in 5 figures, so I massage my stories to basically make a pitch, similar to journalism. And I also... these are just 3 events that define my PhD. I had some unexpected health problems that changed my life. Black Lives Matter, the brutal killing of police, of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and many others, and a COVID-19 pandemic, which is still changing our lives as we know it. That might not be a pandemic, but it's still living with us, and it's not going away anytime soon. And then I was in my house in New Haven in 2020. The president of Yale was saying, we are doing great, we're changing everything, we're doing fine, you're gonna have your health insurance, you're gonna be okay. This is a university that has more money than my country, which is a country of 3.5 million people. Yale University has 10,000 students. So sure, while I was being okay, I saw that a lot of people in my community in New Haven actually, instead of staying at home, they started moving more than ever because they were door dashing for us. They were doing Uber Eats. So the lived realities of people in my city was different blocks to blocks. And then I read one of those papers that I was like, oh my God, I could actually like try to combine some of the frustrations with what I'm feeling in my local city with some of my science. And this is a work by Chris Schell, who is one of the leading environmental justice scholars in the United States. And it's one of the very, very few actually African-American ecologists at one of these universities. It's still completely underrepresented, but it literally links how systemic racism in our urban environments has shaped literally our trees, our clean water, and even our birds, as you will see later. And Chris talks a lot about redlining, and I'm going to talk about this. And every single time I talk about it, it's a little bit of a difficult topic because my legal status here is I'm a non-immigrant alien in this country, and I'm going to talk about systemic racism of a culture that's not mine. So please bear with me in a race that's not mine. So redlining in the United States is one of the best examples that I know, besides apartheid in South Africa, of a federally mandated systemic racism practices that excluded and withheld entire parts of the population based on the pigment of their skin from accumulating intergenerational wealth. So this happened right after, a couple years after the Great Depression, when the government wanted to basically give loans for homes without interest rates to U.S. residents to accumulate wealth. Well, great idea, but only 1.8% of those went to African Americans. And what's also very interesting is that approximately 1 of every 5 people in the United States that was white was getting these loans. And what's most bizarre about this, and the reason it's called redlining, is that the federal government made a collaboration with the homeowners loan corporation, and people were sent into cities, and they literally divided cities based on perceived safety investment, based on the race on someone's skin, which is insane, right? So imagine in New Haven, some places literally just based on the pigment on someone's skin, cities were divided and loans were given. And accumulating wealth through homes is one of the best ways of intergenerational wealth. And what we can see as well is that there's a lot of research showing that people that live in these redland areas even nowadays have higher rates of cancer, lower home ownership. They have lower life expectancy. And there's some interesting work in environmental sciences that also shows that there's less trees in redland areas. There is more urban heat island, which under climate change is going to increase risk of heat stroke. And I will read you in a little bit one of the arguments that the city of Baltimore made for determining that one of these neighborhoods was a really, really bad investment as soon as the projector comes out. But until then, I'm going to keep spitballing. So I read Chris's paper on systemic racism shaping our urban environments. And how does that, I will just try to summarize that. Systemic racism leads to segregation, which leads to very different ways where we build wastewater facilities, roads, buildings, where we build little parks, where we maintain these parks. Animals care about green spaces as much as we do. So animals are also distributed very differently based on how we as humans build some of these amenities. And what I'm interested as a biologist is, or an ecologist by training, is to look at where do animals go, where do they live? And not just that, but where do we have data on this? Because unfortunately, we live in the age of, or like fortunately for some, we live in the age of big data, where data determines everything. There's a book called Data is God, which I find very interesting. So I'll give you an example. There's probably like 80 bird species here right now, and probably online there's like information on 12. So the legal apparatus of bird protection is based on data. So those 68 birds right now, one of them might be endangered, which would go to the Supreme Court if someone ever wanted to change a zoning law here, but it's never gonna happen because there's not an evidence. So I'm extremely interested in seeing where do scientists collect data, where do participatory scientists collect data, and I was interested in, given one of the most blatant example of systemic racism in this country, can we detect signatures of systemic racism 90 years later? And this will be a story of, do we have less biodiversity in some of these cities, or do we have less biodiversity data? Because they're completely different things, especially now that the Biden administration has put environmental justice at the core of their conservation priorities. And over $29 billion in the last 2 years have been spent under the Justice for the Executive Order for climate mitigation, such as green space restoration. And there's not a single way of funneling that money into biodiversity right now, and I'm working with policymakers to create a way, because right now we can't even funnel those $29 billion to communities that have no information. So it's completely messed up. But what do we do? Well, I'm just gonna summarize 3 years of work into a couple minutes. So what we did is, I just downloaded all the data we have on birds from 195 cities. For example, New Haven, this is the red line map of New Haven, LA, Detroit. And what's interesting here is that this involved 38 million people living nowadays here. And it was a really simple question. Where is the data of birds depending on redlined areas? And what I also found interesting is that, why do I choose birds? There's 10,000 species of birds, but people are like borderline not healthy obsessed with birds. Like my friends who are bird watchers, there's probably some bird watchers here, like, you know what I'm talking about. Like, and I love birds, but there's 600,000 hobby ornithologists in this country alone. It's one of the biggest hobbies in the United States. So we have 600,000 people getting data for free 24/7 for scientists. Amazing. And I wanted to also compare who's more biased, scientists like me or hobby people or children, and you'll find out in a bit. So the doom and gloom first and then the hope. So if in this plot, what you can see is redland areas, not redland areas, and a trend. There's more than twice as much data on birds per square mile in non-redland areas than redland areas, even after accounting for all the stuff a bird should care about. Even after accounting for green space, for water, for temperature, for heat, for bare soil. So all of that stuff that birds should actually care about, after accounting for that, there's still more than twice as much data. And I'm just gonna go back really quickly to just read one of these quotes based on, oh, I don't have it, but Baltimore determined that one of these neighborhoods was a really bad investment, quote, based on the threat of Negro encroachment. So that was a federally mandated policy that determined that this was a risky investment. So I want to here also say this was not the first, this is not the only racist practice, and there needs to be more investigation in city-specific measurements like covenants that happened. But first thing we saw, there's more than twice as much bird data in non-red line areas than red line areas. And if we think about the legal mechanisms that we have to prevent any zoning laws, think Migratory Bird Species Act, Endangered Species Act, among others. But well, what about in the last 20 years? In the last 20 years, we have smartphones, right? Really cool. We have like a hyper-tuned AI-friendly machine that can track us 24/7 without our consent. And we can also log data. But what's crazy here is that in the last 20 years alone, green and blue are going up steeper than red and yellow. So the inequalities actually in where we collect data are getting worse every 20 years by 40%. And if we want to center environmental justice at our core, at the federal government, we might want to change these things if we want to actually preach what we say. And I'm going to take you to my beautiful town of New Haven just to pinpoint this point. This is New Haven. A6 is where my office is, at Yale University. Really nice green space. D4, that's Dixwell Avenue, primarily African American neighborhood. You take 2 traffic lights, and then you take a right, and you're in D4. 300 meters, 900 feet away. At Yale, we have found 109 bird species and almost 3,000 bird observations per square mile. If you cross 900 feet, only 17 bird species have been located, and almost like 1,000% less data. No one here can tell me that those 109 bird species have never flown over that other space, right? But if we ever were to have ask the Nature Conservancy or Audubon for $5 million to maybe fund an educational campaign, it's pretty obvious where they're going to do it, right? Based on where we have these birds that donors really like. And so this is a huge, huge problem that's amplifying. And this paper, as we said, is behind a paywall, and unfortunately you will not be able to read unless you email me and I can send it to you, because that's just the horrible way that scientists have stupidly decided that like that's how our job opportunities are based on a metric that's outdated. But this is if you're interested, this is just like a more popular, digestible article, way better written than what I wrote and had to cramp into 5,000 words of jargon. And well, I want to tell you also that it's not, this is what I always tell my students in conservation biology, like it's not the end of the world. Like there's so much good local change thinking globally, such as what we're doing right here, or learning about art and connecting with our past and our future. And these are mechanisms that I'm thinking forward. I'm thinking about how to make the federal government actually do what they say and put their money where their mouth is by creating new ways of funneling that money into these communities. The last thing I want to say is that like bird watchers should not go to these neighborhoods. We need to put K-12 STEM education funding so that people can learn how to bird watch, because it changes the way you see the natural world. I want to make communities more aware of the legal mechanisms that they can use if they record these different species. I think that participatory research could be almost like seen as civic engagement, because if you have information of an endangered species on your property, it's a whole different ballgame to ever change anything where you live. It has gone up to, not that this matters in nowadays, but there was a darter in Tennessee, and someone found it and didn't want a dam to be built. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court voted in favor of the darter. 10 years later, eventually the dam was built, but these things can go up to the Supreme Court. It's a public health concern. It's super messed up that we have data on mosquitoes. I can better predict where we have information on mosquitoes based on money than anything else, but we all know that mosquitoes are everywhere, so it's even a public health concern. And if we think about invasive species, jumping worms cost billions of dollars to the US economy in damage, food insecurity. We might want to sample in places where people would actually be the most affected to these economic damages. So my little solution is local, and it's just basically combining these 2 books and maybe putting a keyboard in here. So I'm going to shift a little bit of gear, and hopefully maybe the sound will work actually. This is my other part of the hat that I do when I don't ask donors for money to do research, is I combine AI, music theory, and biological theory to show you the hidden lives of nature. What do I mean with this? You're going to hear data and art from pigeons. These are homing pigeons at the University of Oxford. This is just their tracks. They have like tiny GPS backpacks, and I just printed that on canvas. Each color is a different animal. It looks pretty. These are other pigeons. It literally looks like a canvas where someone like splashed something on, but that's literally just a university building, and these pigeons were trained to fly in the middle because someone was interested in seeing who's the leader when flying. These are stickleback fish. And these are termites on a petri dish that are gonna make techno in a little bit. So getting to this, how it all started. Well, these are the termites that just made this art. And this is an algorithm that uses computer vision to track these termites. This termite is a total hipster and totally changed the song because he refuses to move. But I will shorten like 3 years of R&D into like 1 minute by saying that the rules of music and biology are not that different. Animals, groups don't want to move too far away together. They don't want to be too close together, and they want to move at similar speed. If you think of birds flying in V formation, those are the rules of musical harmony, chord progressions. So we have these termites walking. Our Excel sheet, we get a beautiful Excel sheet that tells us in which time, in which space, and longitude and latitude is termite A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And using those rules of collective behavior, we can start making music. And this is just like randomly drawing 4 instruments on GarageBand on termites and seeing what they sound like, because the rules of animal collectives are actually harmonic. If you see like 1,000 starlings flying together, right, it looks like harmony, like an orchestra. Thank you for the termites for not charging me for this. So what we can also do, and which I will show you in a little bit, is that this is really nice, but how about we change the way we teach about K-12 STEM education, and we teach kids how to make this. So how fun would it be for kids to not just learn about bird watching, but to learn about bird watching through sounds. There's an app called Merlin, if you're interested, that recognizes birds based on their sound. How cool would it be to teach kids not just how to bird watch, but grab those sounds, go to a hip hop studio, and make beats out of that, or it's bachata, or lo-fi. So that's exactly what we did, and what we're doing right now. And because there's very, very cheap ways actually of teaching this. I mean, I'm from South America. Like, there's always a cousin of a cousin of a cousin who'll get it for you for like 1/100th of the price if you ask nicely, which is something scientists should learn how to do much more, as well as sharing the mic and letting other people speak, or not just putting my name first and everyone else, because it shouldn't matter who saves the natural world. But we want to publish in Nature and not understand nature nowadays, unfortunately. But anyways. You will soon see some slides of a participatory, bottom-up, EJ-centered biodiversity campaign where we took some kids on an urban farm in New Haven that was 1 acre in Edward Street. We recorded some songs of birds for like a day. We recorded sounds of the chicken, and we made a song out of it. And we made a biodiversity-driven story of it. What do I mean with that? I put literally like tiny bird spy microphones, as I would do for my work, to study rainforest deforestation, but I put them on the farm. And what's incredible is that these kids, in 1 month with me, we detected 10,000 observations of birds. So we 50 times increased what was available in the last 180 years with under $200. And then we made a song, and we discovered that there's over 60 species of birds using that urban farm, like in downtown New Haven. So that's what you can see here. We put these tiny microphones on, and I'll be playing some of this at Slingshot today with more like harder beats. But this is a spectrogram of the farm. That's a beautiful urban farm. That's Jonathan Koss, a friend of mine in electric engineering, who helped out with this. And you can make stories like, the loudest bird in my farm is a blue jay. Beautiful bird, sometimes also super beautifully annoying. But we detected 60 species in 4 weeks. That's 6% of every single bird species in the United States. Which is amazing, right? Imagine what we did if we had this in every single urban farm or community gardens across the United States, and make a network combining food justice, environmental education, showing that literally youth can make incredible science that we haven't been able to do it. This is what the AI tells you, which is pretty cool. It tells you, hey, I think I found a chickadee with 98% confidence. This is really important biodiversity data collected by kids. You can check this song out on Spotify, I think, under my name. It's called Farm Birds Sing a Song. And this is just installing some cameras. a little game camera to like make recordings and art, visual art of who else is living the farm using that space. Obviously, it's the gopher that no one likes, but like, and this is kids making music and art out of these sounds. I think this might be a, oh yeah. So what I've learned as a scientist combining stuff with artists is that it's okay to do exploratory research. It's totally, totally fine. I feel way less judged among artists and musicians. There's a lot of parallels. Communication is really important because if someone tells me scale, I'm thinking a scale of a satellite, but my friend Matthew thinks a G major. So it's really important to be clear. But we were able to collaborate with cancer survivors who made hope, rocks of hope. And I'm a scientist, but when I read this is actually what makes me get hope and build community. Not a paper that I read, but like interacting with local community members about how they see nature. The birds sing even when it rains. Sing the song you were born to sing. There's some kids making local art of New Haven, making beats out of a plant. We were lucky enough to have support and make an art exhibit, and I had never done an art exhibit before, so when the artists saw my PowerPoint of the description of my set, they were pretty disturbed because they were expecting more from me. And I wanted a fish tank in the middle because I wanted real-time music of the fish through the AI, but they didn't let me. So I just called the building the fish tank because it looks like a fish tank. But here we have the art exhibit. We have someone literally putting like a song of a bird so that the AI recognizes it, so they learn that artificial intelligence is not just evil. It can be used for incredibly good things. There's a field called computational sustainability if you're ever interested in like really cool things AI can do for good instead of just like mining our money when someone goes shopping. We see the termites making music in the back. We made a little art contest in Spanish because that way we increased our participation in twofold because New Haven is an incredibly segregated city, and that's just a community I have found much easier to engage with because it's my own. And these are the three winners of this art contest. We had every single owl species in Connecticut played. There's a 3D chicken, and her mom sent me like a step-by-step, like documenting the process of art. I got like 12 images of how the chicken was made, which is incredible. More kids. We had cancer survivors. We had a bunch of these prints of the data. We played live, and you will see and hear in a little bit what these pigeons sound like. We did some more fundraising. An architect reached out to me, and I have no idea how, but she made this artwork out of my termites. Again, exploratory art is great. I have no idea where this project is going next, and I wouldn't want it any other way. And the more the merrier. So if any of you wants to join, reach out to me. We're making new electronic music instruments. This is my buddy Matthew Sutter, a composer at Yale. And these are the pigeons flying that you just saw at the beginning. We made each of these pigeons be their own instrument, and I think we made them into a Gregorian choir. This is music actually from Durham. So there's a flax tower in Durham Forest by Duke University that's measuring basically carbon dioxide. And we put that through some synthesizers because this was for Slingshot last year. So you're going to hear literally burping trees making photosynthesis. We were very surprised that it actually sounded okay. And then, yeah, we played at Slingshot last year. We'll play there tonight. We hope to see some of you around. You're going to hear another song of trees called Tree Mountain. I had a great time at Slingshot, and the second I get back, I get faced with the cold reality of Yale University that it's killing all the birds. They have a beautiful school of management building with the most tallest of windows. So what can we do to make that change? Well, we shame them. So we started collecting all the birds that they're killing, and they asked me for all the spectrograms that we collected with the kids so we can show to the provost all the beautiful voices that have been lost by these birds. And now, not through me, by the Divinity School students, they spent the $25,000 that this $42 billion university said they didn't have on stickers. And we talked about this at a graduate conference in religion and ecology, just talking about the importance of spreading out, because Western science is not that old at all, right, in ecology, and other people have been living a PhD throughout their entire life in ecology, right? I think another thing to keep in mind is I work in the Galapagos Islands. Every time I go there, I go with my field assistant who walks me to where my tortoises are. And I claim to be an expert that makes like 10 times his salary, write the papers, get all the street cred. Without Freddy Cabrera, I would be nothing. I wouldn't even find my tortoise. So just to think that Western scientists were the expert is not true. Without Freddy, who didn't finish high school, who's a goat hunter, I wouldn't have any data. In the 21st century, it's not just about ancestral indigenous knowledge in the past. It's right now. Any tropical field biologist in the United States would not get a data point without someone who probably didn't finish high school in Ecuador when they do field work. And where am I taking this? You're gonna hear the song of the Yale Farm while I start like talking a little bit, some change that can happen at local and national scales. So I have been playing at conferences, both on entomological music. We're working a lot with local partners in New Haven, such as the Peabody, the Public Library, a Hispanic nonprofit that makes art, Signet New Haven, and they just came to us projects in bird watching, which is very, very cheap. And there's just a student or a person interested in bird watching music in any city. Doesn't even be like we're talking about this at scientific conferences to make long-term system change in universities. We're creating an undergraduate curriculum across the United States with the Cuba initiative, where this year kids are going to go to urban farms and install these microphones with local communities, grassroots organizations, and create a new way of creating biodiversity data. And the end product of that class is going to be a song like this. Oops. And yeah, you can listen to the rest of the song on Spotify, but these are just, I'm slowly working with my own country, Uruguay, which is a much longer and slower process because I want to make sure that I'm not the person leading there, because I'm not living in Uruguay, as you can see. But it's nice. This is my grandfather reading a story in the Uruguayan newspaper where I talk about how he was my inspiration to becoming a biologist. And with this, I just want to thank a lot of my vision for this is that you don't need to be a biologist in the tropical rainforest. You can literally do bird music at a local school, at an urban farm, in a hospital, or in your home. And this is a project that's growing, so just take a second to read the affiliation of these people to see how actually interdisciplinary this is, and the least people here are scientists. Because again, like we have such diversity of opinions and of viewpoints of skills, and we can't do it all together. And with this, I want to thank you for listening.